In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what equity is and how you can use it to build your wealth through property and investment. So when you're standing at the barbecue with all of your mates, you have some idea what they're talking about. So the general narrative goes like this. You've bought your first home, you've lived in it for a few years, you've paid down your mortgage, the property has gone up in value, and now everyone is all of a sudden talking about how they're using equity to buy investment properties, and you have no idea what they're talking about. And this is the secret on how people are actually buying property with no more cash down, because theoretically you should only ever save for one house deposit and that's it. The rest of it should be paid with equity and capital growth from properties you already own. Why does property work in the long term? Property generally increases in value steadily over time. Over the past 10 years in Australia, we have achieved a 5.4% annual growth rate on average across all the home prices. And this is why so many people in this country love property, is because it increases your wealth slowly over time. And with this growth comes opportunity, but opportunity only comes with time and strategy. So the basis of it is, while you are paying down your debt, your property is theoretically growing in value. This is what creates equity. So equity essentially is the key to scaling out an investment portfolio without having to save any more cash of your own. The equity in the property is able to be leveraged to create more cash for you to deploy in the future. And what you choose to do with that money is up to you. So what is equity and what is usable equity? Because they are two very different things. Let's take this for example. We have a property that is worth $1 million and we have an outstanding mortgage that is $500,000. The equity, so to speak, in this scenario would be $500,000, which is the difference between the outstanding mortgage and the value of the property. However, this is not all usable. Usable equity is usually up to 80% of that property's value. So for the same $1 million property, you can technically leverage up to $800,000 in this scenario here. If you had an outstanding mortgage of $500,000, you could theoretically access $300,000 worth of equity. Now, the bank won't let you take the full amount of equity out because at the end of the day, they need to have some sort of skin in the game and they need to hold some sort of security over the property you are leveraging. It wouldn't make much sense if the property was leveraged to 100%, completely exposing the bank. So if property prices were to fluctuate or you needed to sell down for some unforeseen reason and the property is not worth what it is valued at, then we run into a little bit of a problem. So the banks like to keep a little buffer, generally 20% of the property's value. So the next part is, how can we actually use equity to be able to buy a second property? We generally achieve this through loan splits. This is because we need to break up what the purpose is for the loans we are taking out. It doesn't matter what security these loans are attached to, it just matters what the purpose of these loans are. The simplest way to use equity in your property is to refinance the primary owner-occupied loan, so back in our example, $500,000, and create a secondary loan split of $300,000, which would be your equity split. This would be for investment purposes. You can set it to principal and interest repayments or even interest-only repayments, with the purpose being investment. Generally, the interest rate will be different to that of your primary loan because the purpose is for investment, which in Australia carry higher interest rates. Now, I'm not going to dive into tax deductibility because that is a question for your accountant. But it is important to know when you do take out an equity split, it really just depends on what you use that money for. If you tell the bank you're taking out an investment split and then you go ahead and use that money to renovate your home, when you go to your accountant at the end of the financial year, they're going to say, hey, what did you use the money for? You're going to tell them and they're going to say, well, that is no longer tax deductible. So always be careful and consult your accountant whenever you want to make any sort of investment decision. So let's fast forward. You've refinanced your mortgage, you've taken out the equity split, and we have $300,000 sitting in cash in an offset account ready to use. And the next question might be, well, how do you use it? It will work exactly like any other cash deposit you would have used to purchase your first home. It is cash you can transfer to the agent once you purchase the property, or even put into an account for settlement funds for things like stamp duty and the remaining funds to complete the purchase. Then once we've done that, we would then take a separate loan that is tied against our investment property and complete the purchase that way. The reason we do this is because we only want to have one security attached to each loan. You can have multiple loans attached to one security, but the general rule of thumb is to not have multiple securities attached to one loan. This is what we call cross-securitization, and we like to avoid it if we can. This is something we can cover in a separate video. When it comes for applying for the next home loan on the investment property, we can use things such as the negative gearing benefits that all get calculated inside of the bank's servicing calculators, as well as the rental income or prospective rental income to come from the investment property. This generally gets shaded by 10 to 20% depending on the lender's policy and the location of the property as well. And we also need to factor in prospective rental costs that it might cost you to hold that property as well. Think things like maintenance and property taxes. These are all things that the banks take into account when getting the next home loan to ensure that they are safeguarding themselves and you from financial turmoil. So why is equity so powerful and why does everybody love to use it? Well, it's because it's you actively using what you've built to be able to leverage your wealth into the future. And this is why we harp on so much about reducing the debt on your owner-occupied property, because this property here can then be used in the future to leverage for investment. Whenever we think about our debt, we need to remember owner-occupied or personal debt is what we classify as bad debt. Any debt taken out for investment purposes, we generally classify as good debt. This is another conversation for your accountant. It is so important to wrap your head around this concept because it's what helps you build wealth. In Australia, we love property, and property is so powerful because we can leverage. Once the property goes up in value, let's say your second property then increases in value once again, you can rinse and repeat the same cycle, taking equity out and moving on to purchase the next property. So everyone you've spoken to that has scaled an investment portfolio, I can guarantee you this is exactly how they started. Their owner-occupied home or their first property, gaining equity and then moving on to the seconds and thirds. We can start talking about things like tax structures and trust structures, but again, this is for those who want to get your first property under your belt, or first investment property under your belt rather, and to build your portfolio out early. However, there are some key risks and considerations for you to make before you go ahead and use equity to buy an investment property. Firstly, you still need income to support the loan. Great, you have some equity inside of your property, but if you've listened to me before, there are two things we need when getting a home loan. It is income and it's security. Equity falls under the security umbrella, and your income, if you have no income, well, guess what? There is no loan. And also, buying the wrong investment can definitely hurt you. It is always my recommendation to use an experienced investment-focused buyer's agent to be able to purchase that property for you. That is, of course, unless you have the time to research the data and the areas you wish to buy in to make sure you are putting yourself in the best position to gain equity in the second property and overall wealth long term. Buying an investment property needs to be part of a bigger plan. You shouldn't just purchase a property because you feel like that is the next natural step you need to take in your life. Think about where you want to go and what you want to achieve, because using your equity to purchase property might not be what you want to do. You may even want to use that equity to invest in a share portfolio, which is definitely something that a lot of people do. If you're unsure on what to do next, reach out to myself. I can help you find out if you have equity inside of your property, but if you're ready to purchase a property, let me know and I can connect you with a very experienced investment-focused buyer's agent.